A perfect day to talk about plants because it's a day that ends in Y. We absolutely love it, and I think we got two of the best to talk about it right now, as I'm going to hand over the reins of the Glenn Mercer podcast to author, playwright, screenwriter, and stand-up comedian, all-around good guy, Glenn Mercer, who is serendipitously the host of the Glenn Mercer podcast. Welcome, Glenn.
Thank you, Rich. And we've got a very special show today. I am honored to have as our special guest my friend Klaus Mitchell. Klaus has a degree in human biosciences from the University of Exeter and a master's in the genetics of human disease from University College in London. But he is most known for starting Plant-Based News, which I think, Klaus, makes you a vegan media mogul. Would you say that you're a vegan media mogul? Do you feel like a vegan media mogul?
I'm starting to feel it based on that introduction. I've never felt it before. I appreciate the kind word. Great to be here.
I believe you have something like 2.8 million followers on social media. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. And then across the website as well, it adds up, and it's quite a monthly reach. I think it's 80 million impressions each month, but yes, 2.8 million followers.
Wow. And your journey to becoming a vegan and starting this, it didn't take that much time. When did you become a vegan?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. And the true answer is I can't actually remember exactly when. It wasn't an overnight thing. A lot of people that, go towards the plant-based lifestyle or the vegan lifestyle now kind of have like a definitive date where they remember specifically going vegan. But I kind of went vegan slowly. I think back in the day, there wasn't the resources available, and I'm sure we can talk about that a little bit later. But it was around 2010 when I read the China study. I was actually on the way to doing a bike tour in South America, and the only book I had was the China study, and I was just so entranced and inspired by the message in that book. It was one of the most inspiring projects I've ever read. So I kept rereading it. And what's interesting about it is after that, I still consumed animal protein, animal products occasionally, which is kind of bizarre because I was, on the one hand, so passionate about the message of T. Colin Campbell and whole food plant-based, but then I would still think that I would need, just one egg just a week, just to be sure that I get enough protein. And it's kind of paradoxical in a way that you can be so passionate about a message, but still have that latent brainwashing.
Well, I want to say this, that to me, it's really kind of inspiring that you became a vegan because you read a book. As an author, that's like the best answer I can hear, almost the best answer. I'll give you 9 points for it. If it had been one of my books, I'd give you 10 points, but it wasn't one of my books. So still...
Your books are great, though. Yeah, I mean, you're holding up, Rich, your health book, but the one that I've read time and again is the response to Al Gore, the environmental...
Food is Climate.
Food is Climate. That is the name of it, exactly. I've read that many times. So yeah, massive shout out to that. Anybody listening that is interested in understanding the debate around how much animal agriculture contributes to climate change, specifically greenhouse gas emissions, because you hear that 14.5% figure over and over again, but you really go that step further and talk about how, that's the minimum kind of estimate, isn't it?
Well, the 14.5 figure is kind of a joke. It's from the FAO, the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization. And just a few years earlier, they had said 18%. And then they got a lot of flack from animal agriculture interests within their own organization. And they said, oh, we calculated wrong. It's 14.5%. Now, if you start adding up all the things they didn't calculate, like, for example, what would happen to the land if we didn't have animal agriculture and the forests came back, what we call carbon opportunity cost. So if you factor that in, if you factor in animal respiration, these animals are exhaling carbon dioxide every moment. They don't count that because they say that's part of the natural carbon cycle, that animals exhale carbon dioxide and trees drink it in, which in a sense is true, except if you have less and less trees. I mean, imagine if we had 10 trillion animals in one tree, would it still be the natural carbon cycle? So it's not a natural cycle. It matters how many farmed animals we have. So if you factor in animal respiration, you factor in carbon opportunity cost, you factor in what industrial fishing is doing to the oceans, and if you account for methane realistically and not using some fake accounting gimmicks, it's not 14.5%, it's not 18%. I go by Dr. Silas Rao's figure, it's at least 87%. And even Silas will tell you he can't factor in things like, for example, in grazing, they burn every year. They have what they call pasture maintenance fires. We don't know how much carbon dioxide goes into the atmosphere from that. We don't know how much goes in from bottom trawling of the oceans. So it may well be over 90%, which leads to my next question. Klaus, in my opinion, having studied climate a lot now, having spoken to scientists, having read a lot about it, I've come to the conclusion that the scientists don't know much better than the rest of us how dire the crisis is. So let me ask you, how much time you think we have left if we keep going the way we're going?
When you say left, what do you mean?
To how much time do you think if society keeps going on roughly the way it's been going, with animal agriculture, with the burning of fossil fuels, how much time before it just doesn't become livable, where we have extraordinary crises and mass migrations and extreme poverty and hunger, and the world isn't recognizable?
I mean, I don't think anybody knows how much longer it will be until we actually start dying. I mean, there are some predictions about food insecurity. The prediction or the statement that really sticks with me is Sir David King, who is the chief scientific advisor to the UK government, I think in the 90s and 2000s. He said about 6 months ago or 9 months ago, what we do in the next couple of years will determine the future of humanity. And I think that's the really important time frame, like the amount of time it'll be until we can, reverse the trajectory and the projections so that we avoid the worst effects of climate change. If we miss that opportunity, frankly, I don't know how long it will be, but I know that the next 2 to 8 years, what we do and what we decide not to do will probably determine the future of humanity, in my opinion. What do you reckon?
I agree. And I think what we do in terms of animal agriculture will matter more than anything else. It will matter more than, to what extent we have clean energy versus the burning of fossil fuels. And then the question is, do you see any progress in terms of transforming to a vegan or more vegan world?
I see a big tragedy because what we have is a situation where the current system, the capitalist system, is heading in a kind of direction where I don't think we will systematically exploit billions of animals each year, and we won't continuously breed into existence tens of billions of animals each year in the next 40 or 50 years. I mean, according to The Economist magazine, 60% of the meat market will be made up of animal-free products by 2040. That means only 40% will be conventional slaughter-based meat. And there's some even more promising data and projections from a group called Rethink X, which say that in sort of like 10 years, the dairy industry could be disrupted or transformed in the US. And the real tragedy is that, like, in the same way transportation industry said goodbye to the horses and invented the engine. And in the same way, the energy sector said goodbye to, whale oil and then moved to kerosene. We're seeing a kind of similar trajectory, except it's not going to happen quickly enough. This innovation is happening. The money's going into it. It's just the real tragedy is like, it's not going to happen quick enough. I said that the quote from the chief scientific advisor to UK government, I think other people echo that. And so we have to ask ourselves, what can we do right now 3 times a day so that we're not waiting for a government, so we're not waiting for food technology, which are a bit weird anyway, let's be honest. Just as you say, just eat natural food. That's kind of like the call to action, I think, because we don't have the luxury of time. So I guess, I know I've kind of been talking quite a lot, but even though I'm optimistic about the inevitability of these technologies, whether it's, whatever it is, like plant-based products, cultivated meat, precision fermented dairy, I don't think they will deliver the pace of change that we need.
So these products that you hold out some hope for, like cell meat, and we have a disagreement on cell meat that we could explore later. But these products that you hold out hope for, they're not here now. But what is here now is beans and rice and vegetables and fruits and all kinds of legumes and mushrooms and so forth. So the question is, since what we have now is perfectly good enough in terms of the human diet, can we get people to see the light? Is there any progress on getting people to see the light?
It's a really challenging one, isn't it? Because there's a narrative in the advocacy, environmental, health, vegan community, whatever you want to call it, that if you educate people and they become aware of something, then they will change their behavior and they'll change their actions and they will understand the health ramifications, the environmental effects, the fact it was 40 degrees in London and the link to climate change in animal agriculture, and animal rights issues and the horrors of factory farming, and then make the transition after they learn about that and understand that. And that's certainly true for a lot of people, probably some of us here today. But unfortunately, the social pressures are such and human nature is such that we just go along with whatever we're used to. I think there's that saying in your speech that the problem is it's just culture at the moment. Animal products are ubiquitous. It's not that everybody's corrupt. It's not that people want to do the wrong thing. People want to do the right thing. And inherently, you've got that inner compassion that leads us down that compassionate direction. But as you say, it's just a culture that is toxic, where animal products are everywhere. They're in everything. We're not just talking about food. We're talking about, in tarmac and tennis balls and fashion and cosmetics. And again, just to come back to like the core point, it's like the real tragedy is that animals as a mode of production are going to be phased out. But again, like, is that happening quickly enough? And so I completely subscribe to your idea. Like, why not go for the food that's available right now? And it's also better for public health issues such as antibiotic resistance and pandemic risk. And it's better for personal health. And it's immediately better, for the animals and the environment, and the list goes on. And so let's just do that. And it's a very frustrating thing that I think, unfortunately, in a kind of weird way, behavior will have to change first. And then maybe, just maybe, people think, putting 70 billion animals through factory farming every year probably wasn't that good. And then they have the ethical realization, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I've had a discussion sometimes with a good friend of mine whose name is Arlo Vegan. He wasn't born with that name, but he took that name. He was born Arlo Carnivore, I think. But anyway, Arlo says that when people become vegan for moral reasons, because of the treatment of animals, because it's so cruel, they then are committed and they're less likely to switch back. I'm not sure if he's right. I initially became a vegan for health reasons, and I haven't switched back. Do you have a sense about that? That because we do hear about vegans who go vegan and then go back, and I can't understand why. But do you have a sense about whether if you come at veganism from one perspective or another, from either concern for the animals, concern for the environment and the climate, or concern for health, you're more likely to stick and bring other vegans with you?
I think the data says the environmental reasons are the things that lead people into the plant-based lifestyle. And then obviously understanding what happens to the animals leads people into, veganism as an ethical lifestyle. But I think of it as kind of like two groups, like the conscious consumer and the unconscious consumer. The conscious consumer is growing certainly in the West, in developed places in North America, in the UK, in Europe, and Australasia. So more people becoming flexitarian. I think there was a poll in January this year that said 33% of the UK were interested in becoming vegan or plant-based. And that's obviously grown a massive amount, in the last kind of like 5, 10, 15 years. But, what we want to tackle, the cohort, the group that we really, really want to address and convert, if you like, without it sounding like a religion, is the unconscious consumer, the people that are just thinking about and relying on their next paycheck, the people that they just want that little bit of pleasure 3 times a day, that little bit of respite, that sensory pleasure, right? These people, it's not going to make a difference how much you tell them is better for animals and public health issues and their health. They're thinking about the next paycheck. They don't have the bandwidth to think about what's healthy for them or healthy for the environment. And so that is where I think we can see kind of mass change. And that's where I think I've become interested in the last year or two, whereas before that I was mainly catering. I mean, I didn't even mean to, no pun intended, but I was kind of like catering to the conscious consumer, the people that wanted to transform their health. I've kind of realized that if we need mass change, we need to have a message that fits in with those conscious consumers, but also the unconscious consumers, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think one of the factors is if you come to veganism just out of a concern for the animals, then you may not eat a healthy vegan diet. You may be eating the vegan junk foods, the vegan donuts. And then you may find, I tried to be vegan, but I'm having health problems. I guess I needed the protein or something. Whereas if you come at it from health and you eat a low-fat, whole foods vegan diet and you get healthier, you're going to stay with it. Now, Rich came to this because as a young man he started getting mini strokes. Rich, tell class the story, and I know you're not going back, Rich.
No, there's no way that I go back. And actually, I had my first one when I was 28 years old, and I was on the radio, and the owner of the radio station comes in. I was doing a morning show on a Thursday morning, and he comes into the studio at 6:45, and he was upset with me, and he goes, Rich, are you drunk? And I'm like, no, I'm not drunk. It's 6:45 in the morning on a Thursday. I mean, technically, I guess I could have been getting plowed, on Wednesday night or something like that and, sauced up pretty good. But I'm like, no, I don't really drink that much anyways. And he goes, well, you're slurring your words. And I'm like, oh, really? And at 28, I really just thought like, oh, my goodness, I'm probably just tired or something like that. As it turns out, after this happened to me a few more times over the years, they were TIAs and mini strokes that I started to accumulate and went on all kinds of medicines for, and that's my story. And I eventually got to the plant-based diet because nothing else was working. The medicines weren't working. Anything else wasn't working. The doctors didn't have a solution for me. But like I was talking to Glenn before we went on I guess it's not on the air here, before we started recording, I kind of oscillate sometimes like a fan. And I know when I'm on a whole food plant-based diet, I feel one way. I feel healthy and lean and I feel great and my body responds well. And then sometimes, like I've been doing lately, I'll go back the other way and I'm on the vegan junk food diet, and then all of a sudden I'm gaining weight. I don't feel as good, and I'm back to kind of that unhealthy place. Nowhere near as bad as it was, but it's still not so good. But my argument always has been, Glenn, if we're talking about environmental issues, I'm okay with junk food vegans. because that's still going to save the planet. So I'm okay with that. I don't have as I guess as much desire to say, well, you have to do it for your own health. I think people get there on their own. I think people do have to say finally, okay, I want to be healthy for whatever motivating factor that is, whether it's for themselves, for their family, for their kids, whatever the heck that it turns out to be. So I guess. And Klaus, and just listening to you guys, and I let Glenn run all of these things because I could prattle on for hours and hours just talking to myself. When we're talking about plant-based news and what you're doing and what you guys are talking about, I mean, your message is disrupting the conventional narrative, which I think is really hard to do, because you guys are talking about, okay, how do we get it to people? How do we get them to change? Or how do we get them to see the light? How do we, get that messaging out there? Your thoughts on getting the messaging out there, because I definitely think you're hitting plant-based people like me. Okay. And you talked about, maybe also being able to appeal to non-plant-based people. How do you disrupt the conventional narrative? Because the conventional narrative, I don't think is changing anytime soon. They're pretty dug in on their messaging. So when you're disrupting the conventional narrative, what does that mean for you on a daily basis?
I guess it just reflects the messaging that we hear in the health, environmental, ethical communities. In the health communities, that moderation is everything, and lean cuts of meat are healthy, and we're saying actually no, like a predominantly plant-based diet or an exclusively plant-based diet is optimal for health. It's unfortunate that is bucking the trend, and that's disrupting the conventional narrative, because it seems like such an obvious thing to us. But it's the same with the environmental argument and the ethical argument. Free range doesn't really mean much. Regenerative meat is a spurious claim, and it's bucking that trend. Is saying like those solutions, they're not ethical, they're not realistic, they're not scalable. And so the content can take a variety of different forms. It can be long form interviews like what we're doing. It can be short reels. I've been on the streets in central London, just literally going up to people and saying, hey, do you have an opinion about something? And then them coming back and then getting into a debate. It can be doing campaigns, advertising campaigns for companies, or just awareness campaigns. It can be lots of different things. But I just want to explain one anecdote, because this shows how hard it is sometimes, even for a vegan news publishing platform, to go up against a conventional narrative. And it relates to the greenhouse gas emissions FAO figure that Glenn often talks about. When we published the article stating that, Salish Rao came out in the Journal of Ecological Society saying that animal agriculture is responsible for 87% of greenhouse gas emissions, or at least 87% of greenhouse gas emissions, we were actually were written to. Somebody reached out to us, an organization that tackles online misinformation. I don't want to mention their name, but they actually emailed us to say, hey, you haven't referred to the FAO's 14.5% figure. What is going on? And they felt like we were lacking credibility. They didn't like it. And, I was thinking, like, we're simply reporting on a peer-reviewed study, right? But the worst part about it is I gave into their request to give credence to the FAO's 14.5% figure. And isn't it really telling that, if a vegan news publication, a vegan media company plays down the impact of animal agriculture, then of course there's no surprise that governments around the world don't promote plant-based food. Of course there's no surprise that events such as COP26 are never mentioned transitioning away from animal agriculture. Yeah. And so, even for us, like, the point I just want to come back to is, like, sometimes really hard to go against the conventional narrative, and I've seen that many times firsthand.
Could I ask you this? The person who emailed you, or organization that emailed you, did they have any regulatory authority? Was it sort of a veiled threat?
Well, I copied in Salish Rao, and then what followed was several emails between them going back and forth. And Salish was making comments, Dr. Rao was making comments like, the FAO number actually used to be higher, but then the meat industry, the FAO, the United Nations, actually partnered with the International Meat Secretariat and the International Dairy Federation, talked about the LEAP partnership. But then this organization came back, and I've got the emails saying that we're cherry picking the data, and that just because it's funded by the meat industry, it doesn't necessarily mean that, that's not in and of itself explaining why the 14.5% data is wrong. And so you had those kind of conversations going back and forth. I think another point they made was the fact that the 87% study by Dr. Salish Rao wasn't referenced by reputable journals. And again, it comes back to that point that you always make clear that it's part of our culture, animal products and animal agriculture. So of course, it's no surprise that journals still reference the FAO figure, because that's what everyone does. The Guardian have written thousands of articles where they're referring to that number. Lots of medical groups and environmental groups do. So who on earth is going to start saying 87%, because they're going to see his name and they're going to think, oh, he thinks the world is going to go vegan in 10 years. We're not going to give him any credence or credibility. So, that was kind of like the nature of it. But I thought it was very telling, the fact that even we felt the need to play down the impact of animal agriculture. And frankly, that was just because we wanted to protect our 100% credibility rating.
So they had some sway over your credibility rating within the media. Is that right?
Yeah, you kind of like have to play the game, right? You have to go along with the BS.
So that's what you're up against.
Yeah, I was thinking we've got this credibility rating. It's good at the moment. Got that little tick. Like I'm just too busy. I don't want to write essays back and forth. Got lots going on.
Right.
Just pick your battles kind of thing. So then we included the FAO's 14.5% figure.
Okay. Well, hopefully many people will be watching and listening to this podcast, and that'll be corrected. Now, tell me about your own diet, Klaus. Are you simply a vegan, or do you try to eat a whole food diet without oil and a really healthy, low-fat vegan diet?
I try to, yeah. I just had dinner because it's UK, so it's evening time now. I don't feel actually very good. I didn't have the healthiest dinner. I think I had pasta, tofu, sweet corn, tomatoes, and lots of salt. And then for pudding, I had a hot chocolate, and then I had some more chocolate on its own. So kind of trying to be the low fat, it's trying to be relatively whole food, starch based, but then just, letting the team down for dessert.
Well, we could let the dessert slide. Mm-hmm. At least it was dark chocolate.
Not quite, but I'll go with that. Yeah.
And what would you say are the staples of your diet?
So I'm trying to do this 2 meal a day thing now, so that I'm not
really
thinking about food. Yeah. So I wake up, I don't have food immediately. I have my first meal around 11:30. I normally have a smoothie with protein powder in, not because I think I need it, just purely for taste, which definitely isn't whole food. But then I guess there's some spinach and bananas in there. And then I might have a coffee. And then, you know what I'm saying? Like there's elements of health. There's elements of pattern of eating that is trying to keep the fat low. And it's trying to have fruit, trying to have vegetables. But ultimately, yeah, it's I'd say 60 to 90% predominantly whole food, plant-based, and then the other 10 to 30% is kind of processed.
Yeah. So how much coffee do you drink?
Normally like a glass a day, normally.
One cup a day.
But coffee is the crazy thing at the moment, right? Like it makes no sense to have all this sugar and the caffeine, and it's just it's
well, do you put sugar in it?
Sometimes, yeah.
No, I don't do that. No, I'm against the sugar.
Yeah. What do you think of Dr. John McDougall saying a little bit of sugar makes the medicine go down?
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to tell you, since you asked, I'm going to tell you what I think. I admire and respect Dr. John McDougall to the highest degree. He's one of the founders of this movement. And he is, he's really an icon of the plant-based movement. All the same, I think I'm allowed to have a disagreement with him. So here's my disagreement with him. He's been known to say, it's okay to put a little sugar in your oatmeal so that you'll eat the oatmeal. because I want you to eat the oatmeal. And if you're not going to eat the oatmeal without the sugar, put the sugar in the oatmeal. I would say, don't put sugar in your oatmeal. It's breakfast. It's not dessert. Why in the world would you want to take a healthy meal and make it unhealthy? So don't put sugar in your oatmeal. And in fact, you got to learn to appreciate the oatmeal without the sugar. Now you can put blueberries, strawberries, pears, apples, bananas, any whole fruit in there, and that'll sweeten it up if you need it sweetened up. But don't make this bad mistake of putting what's really a highly addictive food in your oatmeal and turn a healthy meal into a not so healthy meal. People need to appreciate that one of the reasons for eating is nutrition, to be healthy. It isn't only taste. And if you take the attitude that one of the reasons I'm eating is because I want to live long and be there for my family and be healthy and not go to doctors, then you won't want that sickeningly sweet taste added to your oatmeal. You'll want that feeling of the meal being unimpeachable. It's healthy, pure, plain food that's good for you.
When was the last time you had a junk meal, Glenn?
A junk meal. Well, my wife sometimes bakes cookies, and they'll have nuts in them. And, maybe a little bit of some kind of sweetener, like dates or something. And, I'll have a cookie once in a while. But it's for dessert. It's not for breakfast. It's not, starting off the day with that. Now, I don't drink coffee, but I did have 1 cup of coffee in my life. 1 cup of coffee. I was 17 years old. When I grew up, I never drank coffee. I don't know, kids. I had milk and cookies. I was a kid. I never thought of drinking coffee. And then I went to visit the college that I was going to attend, called New College in Sarasota, Florida. And let's hope it doesn't get hit by a hurricane in the next few days. I went there, to meet the students, to meet the professors, and there was a coffee klatch at the home of a woman named Professor Bates. So I thought, well, I'll go there and meet some professors and students, and that should be fun. So I went there, and in the middle of the coffee klatch, Dr. Bates calls out, "Glenn, do you drink coffee?" And everybody kind of turns to me, and I said, "I don't know." So she said, "Would you like to try a cup?" And I'm thinking, now I'm going to be a grown-up. I'm going to college. I'm 17 years old. So I said, "Sure, I'd love to try a cup." She gives me a cup of coffee, and it was like drinking mud. It was it was just unbelievably undrinkable. It was horrible. So I had a few sips at most, and I stopped. And I never drank coffee again. I went to that college. I loved it there. About 15 years later, my literature professor retired. So I flew back to Sarasota to speak at his retirement. And when I was there, I met a young student from China. And I asked her what she was studying. And she said, international relations with Dr. Bates. And I said, "Oh, is Dr. Bates still here? How's she doing?" And she says, "Great. She is the most fantastic professor, but she makes the worst friggin' coffee." But I feel that kind of Dr. Bates did me a favor because I never drank coffee ever since then. So you're a reasonably healthy vegan. I mean, eating a reasonably healthy diet, having some sweets now and again. And do you go to the restaurants, the vegan restaurants in London, and how is that seen? Is it burgeoning?
Yeah, it's not cottage industry anymore. It's pretty burgeoning. That's a good word, probably pretty accurate. Doing this 2 meal a day thing, and just like consciously eating, even if I'm in a restaurant, just like consciously going for that noodle soup or whatever it is definitely where it's at. But yeah, I think I remember waking up 3-4 days ago and just having like a few breakouts on my skin and thinking, yeah, been out eating vegan food in restaurants the last couple of days, and it's clearly taking its toll. So I try and stay in and just, whole food, plant-based.
Okay. And how about your loved ones? Have you convinced people in your family, your close friends to go vegan, or do even they resist?
My wife has been vegetarian her whole life, and she's been vegan the last couple of years.
Okay.
Her family are Jain, which is pretty.
I missed
vegan.
those last words there. Her
family
family?
is Jain. So they believe in ahimsa, non-violence to all sentient beings, minimalism, and things like that. So naturally, they're pretty vegan. My parents are vegan, and my siblings aren't. But everybody supports what I do, especially my parents. I'm really proud of them for ditching, dairy and meat, and the health is feeling better for it, and they're very passionate about the cause. So I'm very, very grateful for that.
Okay. And so your siblings who aren't vegan, how much debate has there been between you and them?
I try not to get into a debate just because, diet is such a personal thing. And then it's like the vegans already have the reputation for being puritanical and preachy. And it's like, just take a step back from that and like lead by example. I guess it's a shame when family like come to events, the end of year films that I do, and then they're, clapping and cheering and saying it's amazing. And then they're like eating animal products. The next week, I actually had a story where one of my family members watched Cowspiracy with me, and then the next meal was bacon and eggs, and it's just like just kind of like disappointing, just, I don't know, that feeling of just like, come on, wake up, like you're loving the documentary, it's a good production, the message, you can't really refute it, and then you're having that kind of thing after, and it's a little bit disappointing.
And for our listeners who may not know, what Klaus is referring to here with the documentaries is every year Plant-Based News comes up with a documentary, and I believe, Klaus, that you direct them. Do you not? That's like Vegan Year 2019, Vegan Year 2020, Vegan Year 2021, and you show what's going on in the movement year by year.
Yeah, right? You got it. So I'm working on Vegan 2022 at the moment, which is, I've done it so many years. I started in 2015, and last year was a bit of a washout. It was only 6 minutes, so it wasn't really a film. But before that, they're all feature length, and it's just, it's tiring. You speak to documentary makers, and they're like, been working on the documentary for 5-6 years. And I know I'm not shooting a lot of the content originally myself, so I'm not trying to compare the pet, vegan projects that I do every year to, like a Netflix original or anything. But it takes people a long time. And I guess I'm trying to knock out, feature lengths in 2-3 months. It's like a real challenge. So I think for me, in terms of my personal health, the stress and the disrupted sleep probably has more of an impact than me eating processed food occasionally.
And these annual vegan documentaries that you make, obviously they play on your channel, on the YouTube channel of Plant-Based News. Do they play anywhere else?
Yeah, I think in 2019 there's London cinema, LA, and then Beijing as well. So we kind of got that international appeal, and it's kind of nice, like putting it in a cinema in London and then having Vegan 2022 on the billboard for like 48 hours. But it's high pressure. I remember in 2018, because what you have to export the file in a certain way for the cinema, and there's some specificities about how you do that. I remember just being up super late the day before in 2018, making sure that the file was correct. But the thing is, it takes 9 hours to export. So I was thinking, as I went to bed, if something goes wrong and I wake up and it's like, oh, it hasn't exported correct, then it's mathematically nearly impossible to get the documentary ready for the cinema, and I had like 300 tickets sold. So yeah, I basically just didn't sleep, and then had to get up on stage and, you know, welcome everyone and do a little talk. And then he had a Q&A after with, you know, Ali Tabrizi, who's doing Seaspiracy, and Earthling Ed was there, and some of these luminaries. And I was just like so tired, but the video played and people clapped. So I guess it was good
So you
enough.
got it done in time.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, do you have some help putting these things together? It's not all your burden, is it?
Got some help, but I mean, you know, it's like writing a book. You know, you can get all the help you want, but it's like, it's your thing, it's your name by it, it's your responsibility, it's your, I mean, you know, you must be able to relate in terms of the books that you've written, like the pressure and the, you know, you can't just hand that over to somebody quickly and easily, right?
Right. So you're doing Vegan Year 2022 now, right? Working on it now.
Yes.
And do you think when is the deadline? December?
I think the earlier you get it out, the better. So I'm hoping for an early December launch. But the luxury of it is if you need to push it back to kind of like mid-December, then it's not too bad. But yeah, just honestly, with all this stuff that I'm trying to do alongside that with Plant-Based News, just like, I just wish I was just working on that, you know, so getting distracted. But yeah, also because I've done it for so many years, it's like, how do you continue to motivate yourself when you're doing the same thing over and over again? I mean, some of the people that inspire me the most are people like George Monbiot, environmental journalists,
right,
who have basically been authors and writers for decades, and yet they're still doing it. And I think as a society, professionally, we're used to going into a job, and then within 2-3 years, you move around, right? So you start off as I don't know, like a camera person, then you become a director, and then you become a manager, and then you become a consultant, and then you become but actually, like, how good would you get if you just stayed doing the same thing? And on the one hand, that's quite inspiring, because like if you just do the same thing over and over again, you get really, really good at something. On the other hand, it gets really boring quickly. So I'm just like debating that in my head. Like, do I keep doing these documentaries? You know, because in a way, it's easier and easier every year. I can do it quicker and quicker. But then it's kind of less exciting. It becomes like a tick box. Do this, do this, do this. It's like very boring, if that makes sense. So that's kind of like the debate I'm having.
So I don't know if you could give us this preview, but what in your mind has been the biggest vegan event outside of this interview of 2022?
Like I'd say the alternative protein companies raising a ton of money, like $400 million pre-revenue. So we're talking about companies that not even sold a product, that are years away from selling a product, raising an absolute ton of money. And I think that speaks volumes about where we're at as a society, that this industry, whether we like it or not, is going to be disrupted. And the vegans saying they should do it a certain way in this way, they're like, we're kind of irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. It's bigger than, it's not just vegans now. This is politicians, governments, and business leaders indicating it's not just a trend, but transformation globally in our food system.
So is this the cell-based meat industry that's raising all this money?
Yeah, there's one in California that raised a heap of money. Also precision fermentation, cellular fermentation based companies.
Tell us about precision fermentation. What do they make?
Yeah, I'd love to get your take on it, actually, because I think your main criticism of cultured meat is not just that it perpetuates the idea that you need to eat meat, which is of course untrue, but also that it requires cells from an animal. But the thing with precision fermented dairy is you don't need animal cells. So you basically use microorganisms in the same way you create beer in a brewery through a process of fermentation. You instruct certain microbes to produce certain proteins, and it's been pretty clear that we're able to produce exact proteins found in animal milk and cheese. And actually, in over 90% of dairy cheeses, there's a product called rennet. Rennet is non-animal rennet. So if you look at the back of a packet of cheese, it says non-animal rennet in 90% of dairy cheeses. That is rennet that's actually not from an animal. Back in the day, 50 years ago, it used to be from the intestines of a baby calf. So you can imagine the horror of trying to get that product in the food industry, and nobody judges that, right? Nobody's like, oh my god, that's crazy, that's non-animal rennet. And I think we're just going to see the exact same thing but scaled up. So the entire process of producing dairy is going to be identical in terms of taste and texture. And that's really exciting for me, not just because you can produce dairy from it, but other fats and proteins and other foods as well. And the thing with cultivated meat is, you might be surprised to hear this because maybe you think I'm a massive proponent of it. I'm not a massive proponent of it. And there are an increasing number of journalists and scientists that are coming out now saying, actually, it's hard to create the technology to create real meat in a stainless steel vessel, whereas the process of cellular fermentation is way more scalable and realistic if we're thinking about feeding the population. So I'm not claiming I know the technology that's going to get us to an animal-free food system in the future, but if you look at the evidence, you look at the people that have got their finger on the pulse and their nose to the ground, whatever the saying is, they are predicting that it's going to be cellular fermentation that is the thing that grows and dominates market share.
Now, I'm sure you remember from the China study that milk protein casein is carcinogenic. Is that going to be one of the proteins that this cell fermentation process is going to produce?
Proteins are going to be identical. So it's like, if you've got an allergy, you're going to get that reaction. Of course, you don't have the hormones, the antibiotics. So there's going to be marginal health benefits across the population. I guess it might be, significant, but yeah, it's still going to be carcinogenic for sure.
Well, then I don't hold out a lot of hope for it. I mean, a great new technology to give us a new carcinogenic form of food.
What's more important though, Glenn, the health of our planet or the health of individuals?
The health of our planet. You got me on that one. But, I just can't get behind something that, that is not going to be consistent with human health. And the other thing is that, I remember when I was a kid, Klaus, and I'm about twice as old as you are. When I was a kid, I was told that within 5 years, the United States is going to be on the metric system. And I'm still waiting for that. And nobody even dreams it's possible anymore. And there's nothing hard about it. In fact, the metric system is a lot easier than inches and feet and all that. So, when and I've heard all about we're going to have automated driving, we're going to have driverless trucks, and I'm not sure I'm looking forward to that either. I'm just always a little bit skeptical of putting all our hope in technologies, especially when the solution is right in front of us and we don't need those technologies. If those technologies show up, fine, but the idea of depending on them. See, my fear is it gives people a crutch. Well, I'll keep eating meat now, but when you come up with that delicious cell-based meat, I'll try that. The other thing I worry about is that the people who are meat eaters, right now they can have the Beyond Burger or the Impossible Burger. It may not be so healthy, but it's there right now. And as I haven't tried these products, but as I understand it, they taste just like meat. And if they're not going to have that now, are they really going to say, oh, I'll eat meat that came from a stainless steel container? I don't know that it makes sense to hold out a lot of hope for it. And right now, they haven't been able to overcome all the obstacles to producing it at scale, at a price that's competitive, right? There's no cell meat on the market, is there, Klaus?
think it's being sold in Singapore.
In a restaurant or something like
Yeah,
that, right?
past regulatory approval at the end of 2020 in Singapore. But yeah, but of course, then you've got the animal agriculture subsidies that they're competing against. So the fact that there are already some animal products that are competing, that are the same price or cheaper than animal products, despite the subsidies that animal products and the animal agriculture industry receives is pretty good. It just shows that taking animals out of the equation is the way to go. And I think that the economic factor is going to be the thing that saves the day, because that's the system that we live in, right? But of course, we want the health community and awareness that there are healthy and affordable plant-based options that are good for human health. That community is going to grow as well. I just don't think that's going to reach more than 50% of the global population, unfortunately.
Yeah. For those who may not know, Klaus has a video that he did that's, of course, on his channel called "The World Will Go Vegan Without Realizing It." Is that the title? Do I have that right, Klaus? Yeah.
What do you think of that hypothesis?
What's that?
What do you think of that hypothesis? Do you think that will happen? Do you think the world will go vegan without realizing it?
Well, I don't buy into the premise that it will happen because of cell meat. I need the world to go vegan soon. Our friend Silas Rao says that we need a vegan transformation in the next 4 years. And, there are almost 8 billion people. And for 20 years, I've been writing books and creating a vegan here and there. I hope that I've contributed some vegans to the world, but then there's a carnivore born every minute, So now that Silas put this pressure on me that I have 4 years to turn the world vegan, what happened is I developed a hernia from the strain. And, so now I got to deal with that, which means I have to take time off writing books to turn the world vegan. So it's really tough to do it on Silas's time frame, 4 years to turn the world vegan. But, for anyone who knows Silas Rao, he's just a great optimist. He's a great, what can I say? A great spirit who has faith in humanity that we'll get this done because we have to get it done. While I don't buy the premise that you've articulated, Klaus, that it may happen because of what you call the alternative protein industry, cell meat, I'll be happy if I'm wrong and you're right. I do object, by the way, to this term alternative protein because it kind of accepts the idea that the meat industry is protein. So since the meat industry is protein, we're going to give you an alternative protein. I don't accept that the meat industry is protein. It's like when you go to a restaurant and they say, what's your choice of protein, chicken, pork, or fish? That's not protein. That's saturated fat, cholesterol, all kinds of poisons and toxins. They're picking out one thing that they think they could talk about that sounds more appealing, but it's all unhealthy. I don't like to give the meat industry credence that it is protein. It isn't. But we've now just about exhausted all the subjects for the interview that I had in mind. Do you have anything else that you want to say to the vegan world about making this transformation happen?
I think, I think that there's positivity in both messages. I think that the more healthy vegans we have, the more sort of tacit activism people will be able to do without even having to do anything, because they just be that glowing example. And I think there's arguments and advantages to what I'm saying, which maybe is a bit more of a realistic, scalable solution, at least in the short term. So I think it's fascinating. I don't think that animals care, which which industry prevails, and the reality is it'll probably be both. There'll probably be alternative protein animal-free products that are processed, that proliferate and take off, and then more whole food plant-based communities, and I think it's win-win.
All right. Well, on that optimistic message, let me say, Klaus, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Rich, please sign us off.
Absolutely. Great job by you, Klaus. And for everybody that is listening or watching the show, remember to check us out at realmeneatplants.com. Click on the support button there. Take the 30-day challenge. Read the blogs. Find our YouTube channel as well, which also has the Glenn Mercer Show on it and all over social media. Gentlemen, excellent job. I love the discussion. I mean, there was a lot of great stuff in there. And remember to check out Plant-Based News. It is absolutely one of my favorites. You could also check out the website. It is plantbasednews.org or .org, as we like to say here in the States. So for Klaus and Glenn, I'm Rich, and we will see you next time right here on the Glenn Mercer Show.